Hello and welcome. This is Zephyr Green, and I have created a modding framework, and I'm going to go over a few tips and tricks on how to use it today. Specifically going to be focusing on weapon editing and creating new weapons for the game. You can find my mod, Desalinated, on Nexus Mods, pictured here. And once you have it installed, you're going to have a mods folder. And each mod can have its own game data. So a little bit like a mod manager, you can just switch between different mods. And so we're in the vanilla game folder here. It's a custom vanilla version for the framework. And we're all the way down into the loot folder. We're going to open the weapons file. And this is Notepad++. I think it's probably one of the easiest things to use it with. This is a simplified JSON file, so the primary difference between JSON and simplified JSON for anyone that cares is that instead of colons, we use equal signs for the most part. And then Notepad++ is wonderful. You can set the language to C#, and that generally will make this look really pretty comparatively to plain text, and it will allow you to collapse these fields. So this field right here that I'm collapsing, both of these fields, these are localization. This is the name of the item, and this is the description of the item in the game, and each line is a different language. So we're just going to collapse those. Those aren't really useful to us right now. So each weapon is going to have a type. Currently they're all just numbers. These are from internal data. The type designates what kind of weapon it is. This one's a sword. It's probably a long sword. I don't remember what type 20 is. And then upgrade factor is the multiplicative value of the weapon. Every time you rank it up at the blacksmith and he pounds away on it, this is going to gain 12% damage. This is its internal name. This needs to be unique. It is text and needs quotations around it. And then we're going to skip these again because we've already talked about them. This is the inventory image. And that comes from a sprite sheet, and that's a number on the sprite sheet. And I'll talk about that in another video. The texture is what the weapon actually uses in gameplay. And it has its own sprite sheet. So you can just reference it by its full name. And these are actually importable now with the modding framework. So you can add your own texture sheets and put their file name in there, ignoring you don't have to put the extension on them. So that's nice too. Flags and specials have been almost entirely removed from the game. These are internal variables that controlled whether a weapon was extra blunt, extra sharp, whether or not the charm was supposed to move around on the weapon, where it was supposed to be located on the hilt or the crossbar or something else. And so these have been almost entirely modded out. Weight is just how much it weighs. Simple as that. Your encumbrance in the game, whether you can move faster or roll faster. And this is a new feature. I have completely redone the damage in the game. And so it is a bit more linear and simplified. But it also allows damage ranges. So each damage type is listed here, and you don't need specials to modify the damage types. You can just say what they are. And so this weapon right here has variants in it. This is still text, but the values are separated by a comma. So minimum damage and maximum damage. And so this averages out to 10. The original damage value was 10. And it's just going to be 100% slashing. But I could do whatever I wanted to here. Then loot effects, we'll talk about that in another video. That's a big subject of this mod. But basically speaking, this is where you could do extra attack speed, slower attack speed, a little bit of sliding forward when you attack. You can do extra weapon reach. You can do gold loss on hit, gold gain on hit, things like that. Just all sorts of stuff. There's about 200 different affixes. Not all of them are going to make sense for a weapon, but they're there. We'll talk, like I said, we'll talk about that in another video. Weapon spell strength. In the original game, the weapon's base damage was used for spells. And so that has been separated out into its own category. So as this averages 10, this is just being set to 10. So you can change this. If you want the weapon to be a really good caster weapon, that's great, you can do that. This is 100% used by staves and wands, but it's only going to be used by swords and crossbows and whatnot if that number is higher than the staff or wand. It's just going to take the highest number you currently have equipped when casting your spells. That's another minor modification from the base game, so that you're never losing damage by equipping something slightly different. It also means that heavy weapons, two-handed big hammers, don't always necessitate high damage for spells, because that's actually how some spells worked, specifically the incantations and prayers. So modifiable. You can use it, you can not use it, whatever. Default's already there. This is a pretty big little section. This is a reference to a shield. This is actually the name. Text again, quotations necessary. To a shield in the shields.sjson file. And that contains all the armor data of that shield. It also contains how long the parry window is, how long you have to gain the parry value, or whether it parries at all. You'd set it to 0. It also can use alternate animations to various effects. The primary two are the shield smash effect that tower shields use, and the parry animation that everything else uses. And I'll go into that a lot deeper at some other point. Stat scaling has also been rewritten. So in the base game, elementals such as poison, arcane, whatnot, all scale differently based on a bunch of rules inside the game. I've removed that. If you don't agree with that, that's just how it is. That's how this mod works. It's simpler, it's cleaner, and so now these will continue to maintain the ratio of whatever's up here. If it has arcane damage, dexterity will buff the arcane damage, strength will buff the arcane damage, etc. Much more linear, simpler to understand, simpler for player expectations. Equipment requirements. The primary is always going to be the weapon type. This is a sword, so it's going to require Sword Fighter 1, because 1 is what this is. And the secondary is only used if it has a flag on it. If it has up here a flag for fire damage, then this secondary will be Magic User 1, or Magic User whatever the number is. And I'm hoping to get around to actually making this a little bit more intuitive for equipment requirements. The swoosh colors are just an RGB with alpha and sizing of the air animation when you swing a weapon. You can change the color. It's typically kind of a gray-white. You can change it to bright neon orange or purple or whatever. You want a laser sword, go for it. There are 3 different versions of that, and I'm not entirely sure how that layers out. So a little experimentation can be done with that. You can see how some other weapons use it. It's probably not that important for most players. But if it's important to you, go play with it. The upgrade path is how it transmutes. So if you go to the alchemist and ask him to transmute something, if you have the first required loot, it will show up this weapon. The secondary loot, if you don't have that, it'll still show the weapon, and it'll tell you how much salt it's worth, or salt it requires, and the number of loot that is required. And so this is not the blacksmith upgrade path. This is the alchemist transmute path. So using this, you can actually make hidden weapons that only the alchemist can transmute. And finally, a merchant sell value. And so when you're selling an item to a merchant or buying it from a merchant, that's its base value. So now that we've done that, I would like to just show you how to create a new weapon. We can just go from squiggly bracket to squiggly bracket here, because that's the whole item. So if I collapse that, you can see that that's one item there, hopefully. And because the weapon file is only weapons, we can go all the way to the bottom, tack in a comma there, and paste it. And we have a copy of that same sword. However, this name right here, this internal name, it needs to be unique. So we can just throw in a new name there. And now we have a new sword, and it's not going to be in the world. You're going to have to put it on characters or create an alchemy recipe for it. It will show up by default because it's using the previous weapon's upgrade path, etc. But you can change it out. So it can be an alternate version of the same weapon, or you can do some different things with its loot affixes. You can change its requirements, change its damage, that kind of thing. And just as a brief notice, this can be swapped out pretty easily. So you just slap in a different sword, preferably the same weapon type. Otherwise, you might have some very strange visual animations going on, as the sprite sheets are different. But you can just switch out different swords here, and you can import these. So that is all I'm going to talk about today. And if you want to just keep making new weapons, just make sure there's always a comma there, and you can just keep making more of them, as long as they always have a unique weapon name, or unique name on each one of these. And that's it. Thank you for watching.